How's it going, everyone? It's Johnny Beard here with a very special episode of the Streamer Stories podcast. Today, we're doing an indie horror tribute with three of my favourite indie horror streamers. Here they are. Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
Hey! Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm so chuffed we've got you guys here. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this podcast episode with me. Talking about indie horror, this is going to be so much fun. But yeah, so we got Tango Mushi, we got Lonely Shark, and we got Brutal Sue. But yeah, can we all introduce each other one at a time? Would that be good? So for people who don't know necessarily who one or multiple people are. So Tango Mushi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tango Mushi. I'm an Irish horror and retro and indie horror, specifically YouTuber and Twitch streamer. Yeah.
And Lonely Shark.
I'm Lonely Shark. Basically everywhere except Twitch, where I'm Sharky. I'm permanently tired, and I'm always scared of the smallest things. Yeah.
Can confirm. Speaking of scared, Brutal Sue.
Hey, I'm Brutal Sue. I'm permanently scared also. Professional slow runner. I can drag a 50-minute game into an entire stream. And I love being scared.
Yeah, we're going to talk about quite a bit about that today, aren't we? Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about indie horror, and this is going to be so much fun. But before we talk about indie horror, we got to talk about horror, I think, in itself first, don't we? And we might need to cover a couple of big games before we do, just to get into the nitty gritty. So, but yeah, let's talk about memories and of horror games. Because if we start with movies and TV, we'll be here forever. So we got to go straight into games. So, yeah, what's our first memories of playing like a horror game? Lonely Shark, would you like to start?
Oh, I don't know. It feels kind of. I never really had like a lot of consoles growing up. I think like my first one was a Super Nintendo, and I don't think there was really anything scary on there. Star Fox was kind of scary. But other than that, I think at one point I bought like a pre-owned copy of Resident Evil 2. It ended up being like the first game that I completed, which kind of had an impact, I guess. But then that was 2 discs, so I was like, oh no. But other than that, I think the first time I really thought that I could play a scary game, I think it was like when Alien Isolation came out. I don't know when that was, maybe like 2012 or 13 maybe. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to play this. And then I got home one night, like this is before I was streaming, and I like sat in the dark to play it, and I had to just close it like 5 minutes in because I was like, I'm not playing this game. Like this is like, it was so scary.
Oh, what an entry. Resident Evil 2 and I mean Alien Isolate. Oh my god, yeah. I can't play it. I just can't play it. I've never played it. I just can't.
I did finish it eventually, like on stream, but not before then.
Oh, anxiety inducing. Tango, what was your first foray into horror?
It was, yeah, as with most people, yeah, it was Resident Evil was my entry as well. I think it's a toss-up between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 1 OG, the DS port of Resident Evil 1. I remember I got them very close to each other when I was like 11, 12. And that definitely, I just loved the excitement of it, the kind of adrenaline rush that you get playing a horror game and still get to this day. And yeah, that definitely cemented kind of a mini obsession. And then I became a streamer, so it became a massive obsession.
Perfect. And Sue, what about yourself?
Silent Hill 2 was my first introduction to horror games. Just like Sharky, I had a SNES, no horror games, just little platformers and stuff. And it was kind of weird because I had a PS2 and I got really poorly. I had like a kidney infection. So my friend was like, oh, this will keep you busy. Borrow this, lent me the game. And I spent pretty much the entire week playing it. And probably the most terrified I've ever felt, including watching horror movies. Like I'd never played such like a submersive horror game. I'd never played a horror game before. And that grew into a massive obsession. If anyone knows me, you know I'm obsessed with Silent Hill. Absolutely loved it. So yeah, that was my first.
Yeah, goodness. It was just funny. Mine was Resident Evil as well. You know, Resident Evil 1, the dogs jumping out of the window was like, it did me. That was it for me. I was done. But yeah, I remember Silent Hill 1 as well. Since we're talking about Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and we will obviously talk about them as well. It's funny, I think Tango, you might have mentioned it on one of your tweets recently about the hand. I used
Oh, yeah.
on the table. That creeped the crap out of me. Just seeing this hand on the table, like I remember. I mean, we won't talk about horror movies, but I always remember, like, like Evil Dead and stuff like that. So I just expected it to jump at me at all times. So some very early memories for me of that. Oh my god, yeah. But yeah, I mean, naturally, the next question is how much of an impact Resident Evil and Silent Hill have had on us as non-indie titles. I mean, a lot of people's first forays into horror. So let's have a quick, brief chat about that. Tango, would you like to talk about Resident Evil and Silent Hill and how much it means to you?
Like Resident Evil, it's a damn fun time, and on top of the fact that it more or less created the survival horror genre as we know it today. So basically every survival horror that has come out after 96 has taken some kind of inspiration, which is insane. But I think same as Brutal Sue, I'm obsessed with Silent Hill. Anyone who knows me knows that it's definitely my fixation. And I think because Silent Hill showed that you can tell very like thought-provoking and deep and upsetting stories through the medium of horror, which is for a video game, that was a pretty surreal concept. Like, films have been doing it for a while, but a video game doing that was kind of new territory. So yeah, they're both very special, but in very different ways, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And what about yourself, Sue?
Well, as far as Resident Evil goes, please don't come at me for this, but the first Resident Evil game I ever played was 4. I kind of done it a bit back to front. But yeah, I played Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube, I think. I'm trying to think. It was a long time ago. And it blew my mind a little bit because obviously I'd played Silent Hill. There is some sort of defense in it, but it's not really fixated on that. So it was like the first game that I played where you actually like shoot a weapon and can defend yourself. And I absolutely loved it. And then I had to play all of them immediately. And yeah, I haven't stopped since. I can't stop. I shan't stop, in fact.
No. Why
Ever.
Lonely Sharky, what about yourself? I mean, I think you mentioned Resident Evil.
Yeah, I feel like Resident Evil definitely had a pretty big impact on me, probably less so these days than it did back then, if that makes sense. I remember just being obsessed with the idea of like Resident Evil and sort of what was happening, and I never really had access to a lot of games or anything like that, so I could only imagine like how cool it was, and I just loved the whole Evil Corporation thing. And in 2000, and I think it was 2001 or something, when the movie came out, like I was just excited to see the movie, even though maybe I wasn't super familiar with the games. I think I played like the second one, but I wasn't allowed to see it because I was 14 at the time, which sucked. But it's definitely had an impact on me. I think just in the whole concept of what it's about, I think is appealing in some way. Even if when I go and replay the old games, I find myself just kind of like getting angry at them. Like, I'm like, why did this door not break? Like, this is just annoying. It's just doing it to annoy me. But yeah, they definitely had a pretty big impact on like my future love of like just horror movies and things in general.
It's like a gateway,
especially I
isn't
think
it?
because they were very like inspired by Hollywood horror films. Is like that's the kind of feel they were going for.
Yeah, 100%. It is like a gateway to horror for a lot of people at the time, isn't it? And then then there's Silent Hill, and specifically, who's mentioned Silent Hill 2. I mean, the psychology of horror, a very different type of horror to Resident Evil, especially when you mention like the Hollywood horror almost, isn't it? So you've already mentioned how much Silent Hill 2 had an impact on you. Do you want to elaborate just a little bit more? And
Yeah, just the whole style of it, the concept of it, I found was very different. I obviously didn't have anything to compare to at the time, but I don't know. It's the fact that it kind of covers mental health, it covers loss and grief, but in such a way that it's still terrifying. And I'd never played anything like it before. And obviously Pyramid Head, the daddy of horror games. That one scene, which I won't mention because it's it's a little bit fruity, but that one scene, I was like, what am I watching? What is happening? This cannot be happening in a video game. And yeah, I'd never felt fear like that in a game. And I know that sounds really wimpy for someone that plays horror all the time, but yeah, I don't know because it was so psychological, and because it touched nerves with with the mental health and all of that. Just a game changer, absolute game changer.
100%.
I love it.
Me too. I think we all
trying not to
probably all do.
fangirl over it,
You're allowed to fangirl on this podcast, isn't it?
I love it.
Did you play it, Sharky, at all, or did it pass you? What's your relationship with Silent Hill 2?
I think I had a demo disc with like a Silent Hill demo on it on PlayStation, and like that's all I needed. I was okay. You know what I mean? I didn't even think I finished the demo. It was like way too scary. But it again, like it was one of those things similar to Resident Evil. I kind of just became obsessed with it without really ever really playing the games. Just the idea of it, I liked. And then when I was in, I think, high school and the movie came out, like I was just so excited for the movie. And I somehow I just end up, I'm one of those people, maybe it's ADHD, but I just like knew so much about it without even actually playing it. And I was obsessed with the fact that, they would use songs from the games in the movie. And I was like, that's such a cool thing to do for the time, which it doesn't really happen that often, but it kind of kept its authenticity in that way.
Yeah, 100%. I know we're trying so hard to not talk about movies, but yeah, Silent Hill movie, the first one is so good. I love that movie. It's possibly my favorite all-time video game movie for me. For that reason. What about yourself, Tango? I think you've done a YouTube video on this topic, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe one or two at this stage, but it's not more. Yeah, I know we just said we won't talk about movies, but I do think that the movie was great because it was a gateway. It was a lot of people I know who haven't even played the game. They at least know, Pyramid Head or the kind of like the surface level things about Silent Hill through the movie. So I think a lot of Silent Hill fans love to hate the movies, but I really think we have a lot to thank them for in terms of introducing people to the games. But yeah, just to piggyback off what Brutal Zoo said as well, I think that not only do they touch on like mental health and all these kind of sensitive topics, but also they do it with such grace and they do it with such kind of sensitivity that a lot of films, books, games, whatever, still struggle to do now, and they were doing it like 20 years ago. And there's something really commendable about that they touch on such intense and sensitive topics so well. I just that's definitely one thing I really admire about Silent Hill, amongst the many other things I admire about it, Yeah,
for sure. Okay, right, we're now going to talk about indie horror. We spent 12 minutes. I think that was as good as we can get it to be. Okay, so indie horror has been in and around since the 80s and 90s somewhat. Obviously it became a bit more in the noughties, and then the 2010s it blew up, as we know, and we'll definitely get into the nitty gritty. But is there any titles from the 80s and 90s that maybe you played at the growing up, or even retrospectively now? Is there anything that comes to mind at all? Gonna pick on you again, Lonely Shark, because I know how many indie horrors you've covered in your time as a streamer.
Okay, well maybe I'm a good place to start, because I don't think I really played any from the 80s or 90s. I'm sort of looking at the list that you provided as well, but like, even Alone in the Dark, I don't think I played that either. So, I mean, it's something, I know about a lot of these, like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Like I've watched not 100, but at least 5 YouTube videos about that game. So, I know a little bit, but I haven't actually played really any of them. Not that I can think of anyway. Maybe Ghosts and Goblins randomly, but
yeah,
I didn't even know that was indie.
Yeah, it's again, because the 80s was one of those awkward times. What is an indie in the 80s, isn't it? Because it's such a niche. It was a niche time, wasn't it? Really, for video games. Okay, no, that's cool. But did you play anything, Sue?
I didn't. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't have the access to it, I suppose, because my family were quite into gaming as well, but they were into like Mario and Sonic and that kind of thing. So yeah, I didn't play anything. I don't think I did. I'm looking at the list as well, and no.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I did.
I provided a certain list, guys.
There is a list, yeah.
Everyone watching is like, what list? I want the list. How about yourself, Tango? Have you played any games from those
Yeah, I had to think about that one a lot because I was just like indie in the 80s and 90s, you know. But then when I looking at the list once again, yeah, I never would have considered Clock Tower indie, but you're totally right. It had a really small dev team, so like it's definitely indie by 90 standards. And yeah, no, in which case then yes, I've played Clock Tower. And yeah, that game is insanely impressive. Like it was on the SNES, but it never got localized, so that's why a lot of us Westerners would have never had access to it. And it's getting a remaster at long last, you know, 30 years later. But I know that was a massive win. That was a massive win for society. But yeah, that's an insane indie horror because it has like a randomization element to it, which was nuts even it's pretty nuts even by modern standards. So to think they were doing that in 95 is insane, that like the enemy and the scares and all the things that can happen and even the key items you pick up are completely randomized spots, and everyone's first playthrough will be different, so everyone's going to experience different scares and that was genius, and it still is genius. It's still very impressive even now. So yeah, definitely Clock Tower for me.
Yeah. I played a few, not many, but a few of the games on the list. Like, I mean, I played I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream. I streamed that, actually. And yeah, it's definitely very good, but very buggy. Very buggy. And I'm starting to play Corpse Party now for the first time, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. It's so good to see so many versions of that come out again to keep the legacy of it alive as well, which is really good. But yeah, no, it is a weird time, and I mean some of the games, like I know Sharky mentioned Ghosts and Goblins. I mean technically it's not, but it's got horror elements, hasn't it? So you know that's why I kind of put some of those games on the list, because what were the first forays into the horror genre? Because it's got a weird history, really. I find when I look into it myself. But yeah, I'd say in terms of like indie horror landmark titles, Amnesia is probably a really good place to start. Is that a game that we've all played? And what was your experience with it? Tango, have you played it?
No, I've never played it.
No.
No, I totally missed out on that one. I think back when it was in its heyday, I watched it and it just didn't really pique my interest, I'll be honest. I want to go back and play it just because it's so, you know, it's such a landmark, like you say. But yeah, when it came out initially, it didn't tickle my fancy personally.
I was the same, you know. Don't worry, you're not the only one. Have you played it, Sue?
Yeah, I loved it. I
Yeah.
rate it very highly. Yeah, it was another YouTuber. I won't name drop or anything, but it was another YouTuber that was playing it, and I started watching the YouTube, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to turn this off because I think I want to play this. And it was on. I got it on the PlayStation. Absolutely loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Shaq? Have you played it?
Yeah, I think I had it originally on like ages ago. I think I played like 5 minutes and just stopped playing because it was too scary. But I recently like went back and played it like last year for the first time all the way through. And I guess I would say like after playing through like so many games recently, I don't think it holds up as well as it used to. I still think like it has atmosphere and some things like that. But gameplay wise, the mechanics, it just felt very clunky and kind of not. I think if you'd played it like back in the day or whatever, it'd hold up because of nostalgia. But maybe because I never did, it just kind of didn't really like work for me. I mean, yeah, it had its moments, but I just found it just felt very outdated for what it is now,
Yeah.
which is understandable.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Like
And
it's what, 23 years old? No, 13. Sorry, 13.
13.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Don't age us like that. Don't age us like that.
Please don't. No.
Oh yeah, but no, I agree. I do agree. I just couldn't quite vibe with it. But again, you know, I think it shows how far it's come in like you said, in that time, in the last decade, how far indie horror's come.
I mean, I still finished it, like, but for me, it was just kind of like a drag. Like I'm like I have to finish it. You know, I didn't really savor it. Yeah. I just wanted to be like, I just wanted to beat it, so I can be like, I did it.
Yeah, 100%. Just going segueing off one of the points you made, Sue. Actually, I like what you mentioned there, which is something about Let's Play on YouTube. You know, I know we've got some brilliant YouTubers here actually, already. But let's rewind the clock a bit to when we have watched YouTube videos in the past. You know, how much of that had an impact on us as players of a game? Did you watch a full playthrough, or if you like Sue said, I don't want to watch anymore because I want to play it myself? What's our relationship with that line of being a viewer versus being a gamer, should we say? Do you want to elaborate further on that, Sue?
Yeah. Well, for me, I won't watch them. I won't watch a playthrough fully if it's something I intend to play. But it is a really good way of discovering new games. It's pretty much how I got into most of the horror games I played back in the day, from watching other YouTubers. And what I'll do is I'll play the game, absorb what happened, and then I'll watch their playthrough because I like to see other people's versions of it and how they interpret things. But yeah, it's kind of odd watching a YouTube. At the time, it was kind of odd watching someone play games. Ironically, I thought that was a really bizarre thing to do. Little did I know I'd end up streaming, however. But yeah, if you're looking for games to play, for me at least, that's the best way to find them, is watching other people play them. And then if you think you like it, then don't watch anymore.
Yeah. What about yourself, Sharky? Did you? I know, and now I reckon you yourself and Tango as well. Somewhat, you're just gonna play them now, aren't you? But before you became established, should we say, on YouTube, what would you have done back in the day?
Oh, with consuming Let's Plays. I don't think I really watched many Let's Plays. I watched a couple here and there, but they were more for the funny aspect. Like if it was a horror thing, it'd be more like maybe a compilation of things. But I never could watch a full playthrough. So yeah, it's never really something that I fully embraced until way later, I think. But even now, I'm I don't have time to watch an entire playthrough.
Yeah.
So yeah.
For sure. What about yourself, Tango?
Yeah, I'll admit I never got into Let's Plays much myself either, but I kind of leaned more towards reviews, I guess. So just people making, say 17-minute review of this random as hell game. That's how I got into Clock Tower, because I watched someone reviewing a translated version of the game, a fan translated version, when I was 12 or 13. But yeah, I was more into reviews than Let's Plays for sure. But I totally appreciate what Let's Plays did for indie horror, because even though I never watched them much, people like Markiplier and stuff like that, they lifted up a lot of indie horror back in the day, especially the 2010s and all that, when indie horror was really coming into prevalence. So I really appreciate what they did for the genre, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so is there any other indie horrors from the 2010s then that we absolutely love and want to shout out about? I mean, this is going to be an open floor session now, I think, isn't it? Because there's so many. But yeah, what are some of our favourite indie horrors from the 2010s then? Sharky, what are some of yours?
I always struggle with I can't even remember what I played last week, to be honest. But I think at least going off the list of the amazing list you put together, just looking through it, not too many, probably. I would say Cry of Fear was something that I attempted to play through. That was pretty good. It sort of had this feeling of I don't know, it felt kind of, I don't want to say Counter-Strikey, but you know what I mean? Felt kind of a bit Counter-Strikey, but it was really unique in what it was doing. And other than that, maybe the Limbo was definitely one of those. That was especially around the time that Xbox 360 was opening up a digital market, so you could have access to these games like Limbo and stuff, and that was a really cool thing for me because that was pre-PC. So Limbo's definitely up there, even though I think now Limbo is definitely pretty outdated, but it led to other games like Inside, which I love that kind of style.
Yeah, I love Limbo. It's one of my all-time favorites.
It's a good game.
So good. What about yourself, Sue? What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I'm literally the same as Sharky. I don't know the dates. I'm so old that I don't pay attention to dates anymore. So I think, did Alien Isolation come out in 2010? Did we say?
I think it was 2012.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Limbo though, yeah, that is a banging game. And again, I'm just going to leapfrog off Sharky, I'm afraid, but I was exactly the same. I think I had a PS3 maybe, where you could actually buy like digital content. And that was one of the sort of first. I don't know if you'd class it as a platformer, like a modern day platformer, I guess, or side scroller.
Yeah.
Not really sure, but yeah, that was sort of like the first modern day kind of that style of game that I ever played. But yeah, I don't recall any other. I don't know when anything else came out. You've got Deadly Premonition on there, I see.
Yes.
I did attempt to play that a few years ago. And I don't want to upset anyone, but I wasn't feeling it. I couldn't. And I was so sad because it's got such a big fan base. And I was so excited to play it. And yeah, I couldn't get into it, which is a shame.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I am now also realizing that the 2010s also include 2015 onwards, and clearly there is a lot of like really great stuff that came out in the second half of the 2010s.
Yes.
So like, you know what I mean? Just looking at like obviously like Faith, but that Faith is like the original first chapter. Lost in Vivo is amazing. You know, Visage clearly. No wait, Visage is 2020. I'm just gonna back that up. But you know what I mean? That was sort of like when indie horror was becoming like, it was like just so many options and easy available through Steam. That's when Steam really started to sort of come together to be able to get these kind of titles.
Yeah, definitely. And Tango, did you play anything in the 2010s?
In the 2010s, definitely the early 2010s wasn't really my vibe, I think, indie-wise. I think the last few years have been when I think, at least my tastes, I feel like games that have been appealing to me have come out more. But I do really like Deadly Premonition, but I completely understand why you wouldn't like Deadly Premonition. It's very much an acquired taste, so I totally understand and respect that. I think why I like Deadly Premonition a lot, as clunky as it is, it's a mess of a game in a lot of respects, but I think the voice acting and dialogue, I'm a sucker for the dialogue in the original Resident Evil, just the cheesy campiness. I live for it. I eat that stuff up. And Deadly Premonition was probably the only game I've ever played since that I feel had that same energy. And that made it very near and dear to my heart, that it gave me that same vibe of cheesy 90s bad acting, and I love it. Ironically, I didn't get into Twin Peaks, but I really do like Deadly Premonition, if we count that as an indie, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised that we haven't mentioned Outlast yet. Again, is that an indie game? I don't know if you can call it really indie anymore, but I mean, for me, Outlast is a massive. Again, when we talk about landmark titles, I mean, you've got obviously we've got Amnesia, and then you know Outlast and Five Nights at Freddy's come to mind. Really, obviously that's on the list as well of games that really kind of shook people in very different ways. So. Those two titles, let's talk about them then. So Outlast and Five Nights at Freddy's. Are we a fan of one, both, neither? Or Tango, what are your thoughts on those games?
Overall, I'm fairly indifferent to both of them. Neither of them really caught my eye back then or now, but I do really respect, especially Five Nights at Freddy's, given that it was such a small-scale indie, and now it's like this insane series, and it's getting a movie and everything. You know, it's nuts. But I've massive respect for it and what it's achieved, and it just shows you that like you don't need to have a crazy big budget to get as big as it has. And I do think the mechanics of the original games, I've only played the first three, Five Nights at Freddy's. I do think the mechanics of them are very simple but effective. Outlast I only played Outlast for the first time last year, actually. I was very late on that one as well. And it was okay. Like, it definitely gets the heart racing, you know. But I guess if I was to be very honest, I don't really think it's anything to write home about. Maybe it's because I didn't play it back when it came out. You know, similar thing to like what Sharky said with Amnesia. Maybe because I don't have nostalgia for it, I'm looking at it with, you know, more of a modern take on it. I don't know. But yeah, they're okay. They're fine. They're there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's the thing about indie horror, though, in general, is that it's so varied as well. Like, and, you know, so, you know, there's going to be certain titles that we don't vibe with, isn't there? What about yourself then, Sharky? What are your thoughts on those titles?
Yeah, so I guess Five Nights at Freddy's, I mean, I played them when I was streaming and stuff, but they never really hit me the same way. I was never like, you know, I was kind of indifferent, and like, I get it. It's very stressful, but like, it's just kind of stress that just stresses me out too much. And to me, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of scary, but at the same time, that's just stress. So I often find like it's just more stressful than scary. I'm just like trying not to get scared by a jump scare that I know is coming. I guess there's the anxiety behind that. As for Outlast, yeah, I didn't play it until much later, until I started streaming. But I think the difference between like, you know, for example, Amnesia and Outlast is that when I was playing Outlast, it didn't feel like I was playing an older game. Like graphic wise, I mean, you play any indie game, they could look like they came from like the past 20 years anyway. But like just the gameplay and the movement and everything with the camera, it worked better than most newer games that come out these days anyway that are indie. So I guess for Outlast, its gameplay definitely holds up today than when it came out and sort of changed things. But my favorite argument that I see on Twitter is when people say that Outlast isn't an indie game just because it sold really well. I just think that's really funny because it's still an indie team and it's published independently as well. So, I mean, that's indie to a T. Were really successful.
Yep.
Even the newer ones, which is cool.
Yeah. It's like the whole Evil Dead argument, isn't it? Again, that was on top of the movie. I mean, you know, the first movie, absolutely tiny budget, wasn't it? And so well, it would scared many of us. So yeah, same analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, I just feel like there's that whole thing. It's like, oh, if it's an indie horror, then it can't be good. You know what I mean? Or it has to have something that kind of like limits it in some way. So when something comes out that's actually good, that sells well and has commercial success, it's like, well, that's not indie anymore. It's like, well, it is. It's just a good indie.
Yeah, 100%. What about yourself, Sue?
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. Outlast, I think Outlast to this day still holds well. I think, yeah, graphically great. For me, it was like the first sort of night vision style game, you know, where you have that terrifies me in any game. I don't know why. And being chased. I know it's quite a basic thing in games and it's really common now, but it was like the first ever game where you basically get chased throughout the game. Five Nights at Freddy's, I tried it. I was late to Five Nights at Freddy's. And I'll be honest, the fan base terrifies me a little bit. And if you do stream it, you might have come across a few of them. They're diehard fans. But I didn't find it overly challenging. And although the lore of it is amazing, I really like the story of it. I found it quite a basic game, you know, like there's only so far you can go with it. There's not any like proper exploration. There's no clues, no puzzles, nothing like that. So it didn't really do it for me, but I do understand the appeal and I am going to watch the movie. I'm quite excited about it, in fact.
Excellent.
But
I know we're talking about indie horror, but a landmark title in horror games was PT. I think there's no dispute about that, and I think the impact PT had on indie horror cannot be talked about, even though it wasn't an indie title, and in fact it didn't even become a game, did it? So big sad. But did we all play PT? What are our thoughts on it? Sharky, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Okay, so PT. I like PT. PT is good, but yeah, it's funny how, you know, it's not an indie game, but I guess technically it can be, considering it was never released as a game and it became a demo that is completely unavailable and you have to do things to be able to get it. So in my mind, even though it's not like an indie game, it still kind of feels like it should be an indie game, especially given, you know, the impact it had on everything. But I remember like it was a struggle to get a hold of because I never had, you know, a PlayStation at that time and I wanted to stream it. So luckily I ended up finding a place that, you know, there's a lot of dodgy ones out there where it's like it's a remake, someone remade it. But I ended up to find like an image copy of the exact one from PlayStation. So I got to do the thing where you talk. It was just, even playing it, I played it, I think, at the end of last year, even playing it and having to do things like talk or say certain things into the microphone, it was still so fresh for what it was, and it was terrifying. And I think what makes it more terrifying is when they tell you information about the game, like at all times, I forget her name, the lady is behind you at certain times, but you don't know. Yeah. But then they let you know that, yeah, she's like secretly sort of following you. Then you can sometimes see her shadow. I'm like, that just kind of creeps me out a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Tango, have you played it or watched it?
Yeah, I had on the PS4 back in the day when it dropped, and I remember all the excitement and everyone trying to figure out how to get to the end of it. And then when people did get to the end of it, oh my god, it's Silent Hill! You know, like it was an amazing time. And I'm still a part of my soul died when that got cancelled. I swear to God, like that was a rough time for Silent Hill fans, and gamers in general, I would say. But yeah, I just think that PT, and still to this day, I think that PT is like. If I could use a strong word for it, I really do think it's perfect. It's a perfect like one shot, simple idea, amazing horror in it. It embodies Silent Hill very well, but it obviously plays better than the older games because I love those games to bits. But you know they're pretty dated gameplay wise. It could have shaped up to be a great Silent Hill and an amazing horror game, but you know it'll never be. But hey, you know. We're still not over it. You know.
No, still got to pour one out for PT.
Yeah.
And Sue, did you play it? Did you watch it? What was your?
I
take
played it. I played it last year also. I didn't have access to it at the time. I was still PS3 girl. I think I got my PS4 just as they took it off store, which was really frustrating because obviously I desperately wanted to play it. I did know a lot about it, and again, I'd watched someone on YouTube because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get it at the time. And playing it after all these other fantastic games have come out that have basically like not copied, but they've taken elements of it. It didn't have the impact that I wanted it to, but that was on me for not playing it when it came out. But it paved the way for so many good horrors, like. I think nearly every like walking sim game has some element of PT in it, and yeah, it is such a shame it didn't go anywhere. It could have been something really special, but unfortunately for me, it didn't have that same impact because I was so late to the party.
Yeah.
Just
sorry,
to add to that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, like, as much as like it was responsible for like some really great indie horror games. It feels like. In the same way that Amnesia and Outlast sort of inspired the wave of indie that came after it, we've had like almost like 95% of indie horrors that have come out have been inspired by PT, both good and bad. But it's almost like we need a new PT or a new Outlast to come out to sort of change the course of everything because like I'm just like, it's just like so many games I've got, I'm like, it's just the same game. And it's like, I guess because I'm playing so many, it's like, just kind of like taking away from anything that the game could be trying to do. It's like how every indie horror dev is using the same house asset from Unity. And it's like, I get in, I'm like, hey, it's the house from the 6 other games I played this week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, at what point? Like, it just takes me out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can feel that. Yeah, for sure. I've got a suggestion about what you just said there, Sharky. I'll come to that in a bit, but no, I'll just talk about my experience with PT because I had a similar situation with you, Sue. I had a PS4 just after it, so I missed out on it. But I did watch again a Let's Play of it when it got announced, and my wife she was pregnant at the time, and I think it's the only game Let's Play I've ever watched that I had to pause because it was so intense watching it. I think it was 2014, I think it was. And yeah, it was so intense. We were both like, okay, yeah, take a breather here. This is so intense. It was so scary. Did things that never had been done really before in indie horror, in horror. And then, like you just said, Jack, obviously paved arguably for the last 8, 9, 10 years. Really, we haven't really had, like you said, that next one, should we say, that has had that next wave, for sure. Got a basic question for us all, actually, which is actually a nice segue based on what I've just said there, which is, why do we like being scared so much? Why? What is it? I don't understand. Why do we do this to ourselves, especially as streamers? It's twofold, I think. Sue, what's your take on that?
I think it's got to be the adrenaline, right? I'm not going to speak for everyone, but at least for me, the adrenaline, the buzz you get from being scared. I'm a big horror fan in general, and horror movies used to be, and I'm talking in my 20s, I used to sometimes have to sleep with the light on after watching a horror movie. I would give anything to be able to have that now. Like, I've lost that, like I walk around in the dark, I'm not scared anymore, and I miss that. But I find like horror games is a whole different thing. because you're immersed in it, that it's in your head. And it just sort of, it brings me back to that feeling that horror films used to give me. And the stories are they're always really interesting or really messed up. And yeah, I love it. And it's an adrenaline thing, right? You get a buzz from it.
I think so.
I think so.
I'm going to come to you, Sharky, and I know at one point your tagline on your Twitch streams was "Let's try to find the scariest game ever." Pretty much, or something. I may be paraphrasing somewhat there, but yeah, why do you like Beast Ears so much? Why are you seeking it out?
Yeah, I think it's like the adrenaline, right? Like, you know, I guess it's kind of fun to be scared, but movies just aren't scary. Like nothing, like no TV show, no movie is scary. I mean, it can be gross or kind of disturbing, but it's like, it's still not scary, you know? And then whereas when you're playing like a horror game, it's like you're in control. You have autonomy over like what you do. So if you die, like that's because you need to actually physically move something. So it's almost like, I don't know if it's like, it's a good example, but it's almost akin to like having a nightmare. You know what I mean? Like you're there, you need to do something, that kind of thrill. And I'm just saying, because I don't have nightmares anymore. I used to have nightmares about being chased by giant crocodiles, and it was like, so I'd wake up and I'd be like, most people would be scared, but it's like, that was sick. I like got away from that crocodile. But you know, now my dreams are just like more like the scary ones are just like the ones that are just really depressing, and that's the real fear. So I guess horror games are like a distraction from feeling from real life and how like kind of like, I don't know, the world is just so messed up. I don't know. It's definitely an adrenaline thing. It's like a fantasy, but it's just kind of, the adrenaline. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, it does things to me. So like, you know, I never even knew that I could scream like Homer Simpson until I was playing horror games, and I still can't scream like Homer Simpson unless I'm actually being scared, which is weird. I can't replicate it. It only happens in a moment, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I love your scream. And Tango, what about you, sir?
Yeah, I think adrenaline for sure, and it's like you said, or like you guys were saying, it's with the film, you know, when there's, you know, the characters go off and then they all get murdered, blah blah blah, typical horror stuff. Like you can't control it, so you just have to watch it all unfold, and you know, maybe that might scare you, but with a game, nothing can happen until you physically make it go forward, make the character go forward, it's the fact you have autonomy is what makes it scary for sure. I think that's definitely the word for it. And as well, you know, whenever you'd watch a horror movie or watch anything scary and you think, oh, I'd be able to survive that, you know, you kind of assess whether or not, oh, I'd be able to manage in that situation. With the game, you can put that to the test, you know? You can put that theory to the test, and you can actually see, well, okay, go ahead, beat the game then, you know? So I think it's definitely that. Adrenaline's definitely the short and sweet way to put it, though, for sure.
Definitely. No, I agree with everything you said, guys, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess, you know, again, when we look at the list that, you know, we've got on people are going to want to see this list. I think I'm going to have to put it in the description of the chat. You know, it's so diverse. We've mentioned it before. So for yourselves personally, individually, what is it that makes a good indie horror? What is it? What do you look out for? What is it that motivates you to want to play, you know, more games like that, whatever that is? What's that one or multiple things that have to be in the game for you, do you think? I'm going to pick on you, Tango, sorry.
With an indie game, I think the first thing that draws me to any indie game, or any game in general, to be honest, at this stage, is like the art style and the kind of visual direction. Because I think I'm so cynical when it comes to AAA games. I think that AAA is just boring beyond belief nowadays. So like that's why I like indie so much, because I feel like it's where you find like true raw creativity, I think. And for example, Faith, which we've mentioned, that I'm obsessed with that game. That is a masterpiece to me, because it's visually, it's just so distinct. It's replicating an old style, but it's got a bit of new flair to it, and it's so artistically interesting on top of just playing really well as an indie game. So I think for me, it definitely would be the visual style that draws me first, almost before the horror, I would say, to be honest, at this stage. Yeah.
And oh yeah, I love Faith, and I do have to personally have to thank Sharky for that. You know, again, I didn't know about Faith until Sharky was playing them on YouTube and on Twitch, I think, as well. So yeah, let's what is your thoughts then, Sharky? What makes a good horror game for you?
Well, I think specifically, I've been torn apart on this on Twitter before for saying this, but no one gets what I'm trying to say. I mean, that's just Twitter, but not that I'm wrong or anything, but it's just an opinion. I think what makes a really good horror game is the feeling of hopelessness. Like, don't give me a gun. Don't give me any kind of weapon. Don't let me fight back. Just put me in a situation where I'm completely hopeless and I need to try and survive and complete it. Because I think it's like every horror game that I've played, as soon as I get a gun, it's like I've lost a layer of like fear because I can defend myself. And I think that makes such a big difference if you're playing a game and you can't defend yourself. It's so much scarier than when you're playing a game and then you get a gun and like level 2 and you're just kind of like, okay, you can just shoot things now. Like, you know, it kind of, not that it's lazy, but I think to be like a good horror game, you need to feel helpless. And if you have a gun, it's just kind of, you know, people have said like, you know, well, Resident Evil, you get minimum ammo. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not an indie game. You know what I mean? That's like a completely different kind of genre. And I'm not saying that that's not scary, but put me in a first person camera view with no gun, just trying to survive. And I think it's just terrifying. Think of like games like PT, for example, or like any of those other games. Like you can't do anything except just like try to survive. And I think that is like the key ingredient to a really good indie horror is just, you know, don't let me defend myself.
Yeah. 100%. So what about yourself? What makes a good horror game for you?
Kind of covering both of what the other two said, actually. I prefer it when you can't defend yourself. I also think voice acting is quite a big thing for me. Because you can sometimes get some really good horror games and the voice acting just takes away from it, you know, when they talk monotone, like how I talk, when they talk really monotone, and there's no passion behind it, just absolutely ruins it. And also atmospheric noises are a massive part for me. I'm not talking about loud is scary, because that isn't always the case, but for me at least, a good indie horror will have really good sounds, really good ambient sounds, you know, like whether it be just like walking through the woods and the crunching of the leaves and stuff. That's what gets me. And the art style, although it's not always important. I've played a lot of these sort of analog style horrors that have come out recently that have PS2 style graphics. And again, they're fantastic because although the graphics are, you know, they're a little bit dodgy, the rest of the game makes up for it, like the story, the lack of defense, and all of the sounds. So I don't necessarily think it's the graphics, but for me at least, it is the audio that really makes it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, I were talking about I mentioned Silent Hill, but again, that was the first time I ever played a game where you had that atmosphere in the background, where you know, and I'd never. It's just gets into your skin, isn't it? And again, the right indie horror does that so well, for sure.
Literally makes you turn around, doesn't it? Like you hear a noise and you're like, "Oh, what was that?"
Yeah.
Oh no, it's the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so how is important to have like a platform like Itch.io? Do you guys think in terms of like the indie scene? Yeah, because how many times there's a game that come out on a platform like Itch.io and then it actually does become somewhat successful because of the you know, that type of platform. What do you guys think? Sharky, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important because, you know, there's a lot of really, I don't want to say bad games on Steam, but a lot of people doing a lot of like asset flip kind of horror stuff, and you can do really good stuff with asset flipping, but sometimes it's just really lazy. But I think the good thing about Itch.io is you can the whole point of it, right, is to work on something. Maybe you're new at it or you want to get into like making games, and you can put that stuff on there for free and get instant feedback and find out what to do and sort of prove yourself a little bit, and then eventually get to a point where you might want to make something on Steam. Because I imagine for a lot of indie devs, you know, you don't want to necessarily just put out whatever you can as fast as you can. If you want to work on something, Itch.io really gives you that platform to sort of put stuff out there without it sort of becoming on your, you know, I don't know, your Steam sort of resume. It's just Itch.io, you know, here's a concept. And you can also do your memey kind of stuff and your you're, you're kind of like in the moment, kind of this is popular SpongeBob SquarePants horror and throw it up there and sort of go viral, but not necessarily have to put a lot of resources into getting it out there or giving Steam a cut. I think it just opens up. It's sort of like YouTube, but for game devs. You can just upload your game and get feedback on it, and people want to play it in the same kind of way.
Totally. So have you found any games through that platform at all? Or?
Yeah, I found a few. I think is it Late Night Mop? I think was one of them. Which quite a basic concept, fantastic game, but I think the platform itself is amazing. As Sharky said, like it's good for devs to chuck something up there. They get their instant feedback. They get help with funding if the game does well, and there is nothing better than seeing it then make its way later on down the track onto Steam as like a bigger title. It is really nice to see it. And as far as like a streamer's perspective, like we get loads of silly little free games, which is really nice. And there's some real gems on there. I think it's an incredibly important platform.
Totally. And
to be honest.
Yeah, I think that I agree with what Sharky said about the feedback, because I've noticed very generally speaking, of course, that the comments under itch.io games as opposed to Steam are usually a lot more constructive. So, a lot more valuable to a developer, of course, whereas, Steam reviews, like it can be a cesspool in there sometimes. But I think on itch.io, because everyone has the mutual love for indie horror or indie games in general, people are a lot more willing to give good feedback, I think. But just in general about itch.io, I think it's a great platform to be experimental, and games that mightn't do well on Steam could do insanely well on itch. Like one game, just to shout out one very small game, Late Night Mop was really good actually. I really enjoyed that game. But also there was one called Leftovers. I wish I could remember the name of the developer now, but it's a very haunting game. I won't say too much because I think it's one of those games that just go play it and you'll see what I mean, but it's very short, like 30 minutes, and I played on stream about a year ago, and it was just a random game that I clicked on itch, and it was just such a gem of a little game, and that's something that itch has in plentiful amounts of, so it's it's amazing platform. I love it.
Check that one out. I've not heard that one. Okay, right, let's talk about streaming then. So let's talk about memories and favorite moments about streaming horror games, indie horror games. Is there any moments we can all think of that, like, that were just absolute gems because of the game we were playing? Sue, have you got any memories?
No, I'm too old to remember things. No, I don't know. It's all a blur. To be honest. So I can't remember anything in particular, but a new thing in my life now is that I jump at things that aren't actually scary, and not just when I'm gaming or streaming, but just in life now. I've become a lot jumpier. I can't think of an example, but people have the farts and stuff on the stream. Like if I'm really immersed in a game, that will trigger me. That will make me jump, which is not something I ever thought would be a thing. I can't think of anything in particular, really. It's all a bit of a blur.
I think that's
and the fact that I make very strange noises when I'm scared. I don't do a Sharky scream. I don't do that. I really wish I did. I make some really bizarre noises, which is something I didn't know about myself. So
there's compilation videos of that, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
God. I think there's a compilation video of your Homer Simpson laugh, isn't there, Sharky? What about yourself? Have you got any memories that you want to talk about?
Probably like, because there was a time where I wasn't playing, horror games. I was playing DBD, just as like, I started streaming during the pandemic and stuff. So it was just kind of like a thing to do. And then I played like this one horror game, and it just changed my life forever. Scariest thing I'd ever played at the time. Literally could not move for like 20 minutes at certain points in the game. Just had never experienced anything like it, and it was just a small indie horror that was just done so well, and it was one of the most creepiest sort of things that I'd ever played. And I don't know if people that play a lot of horror would still feel that way about it if they hadn't played it, but since it was like that first sort of experiencing something that wasn't AAA, that sort of had this feeling that I'd never felt before, just really changed. That's how I discovered the Homer Scream. But like, it was From the Darkness by I don't know whether the dev's name is Naba or N4BA. I just say Naba because I assume the 4 is trying to be an A. But they're probably one of the best indie horror devs in my opinion, and most of their stuff is on itch. But they did From the Darkness, just an incredible experience. It's like a 20-minute game, but it took me 2 hours. Things like that. And then an example of just how great they are is they did, I think, 9 Child Street as well, which was really good.
Yeah.
But they took that house that I mentioned earlier that's in every single indie horror game, but they actually created an atmosphere in it. One of the best uses I've seen of that house. And I think that's just a testament to sort of what separates indie devs from being good to just really great, creating that kind of feeling. And it was incredible.
Excellent. Yeah, that's on my list. I still haven't played 9 Charlotte Street yet, but yeah, I've heard really good stuff about it. Tango, any memories playing horror games?
Specifically indie. I remember when Stay Out of the House by Puppet Combo dropped back in about October, I think it was. That game was in development hell for oh god, I'd say at least 4 or 5 years. And I completely avoided any footage of it. I think there was an early build of it came out at one point, didn't watch that, didn't engage with it whatsoever until the day it dropped. And it's a very, for anyone who might be familiar with it, it's you're just more or less dropped in a house and you have to find your way out, and you have to be creeping around the house while the 2 villains are there, and it completely leaves you to your own devices. You can go about in whatever way you want. It's a great indie horror game, but it was so fun playing it day one because if there were any guides, there weren't many of them. So it was very much me and chat had to kind of pool our efforts together, and people were throwing out ideas oh, what if you tried this, what if you tried that, and it was an experience you don't get to have with games a lot now that walkthroughs, there's 1,000,001 walkthroughs for everything. But because I played it so early on the day of release, it was a very collective effort between me and chat, and it was just a great memory. Even though the game was a little bit buggy when it came out first, I didn't even care because it was just how involved everyone got was very exciting, I think, for a stream.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Dan. And I think that's only something that can only consistently still happen with indie horror, or sorry, not indie horror, but indie games in general. Is that when a AAA game comes out now, there's already guides coming out before pre-release, isn't it? From people who, whereas if you, you can't beat that moment of that feeling of being lost. Again, which feels so well with the indie horror experience as well. Of that, I don't know what to do. I'm lost. Genuinely don't know what do I do. And you only got yourself or maybe chat to help you out with that. So. Yeah, for sure. Okay, I've got a question now. This is I've never done this on the podcast before, but we normally do a top 3 or a 3 games on an island situation, which you've all done. You've all answered that, but let's do a Mount Rushmore. You got 4 indie horror games. What would be your Mount Rushmore of indie horror? And you can go any game, any era, modern. I know there's a lot of our more favourable games are recent games. So, what 4 games would you guys choose? But yeah, please choose me last. I'm gonna go Tango. I'm gonna go you first. I'm sorry.
I can think of 2 or 3, but 4 I'm struggling with. Let's see. Definitely, I think I'm trying to encapsulate different genres with those 4. So I think if you want something that replicates Resident Evil, pure Resident Evil 1, 2, 3 energy, Alyssa is the way to go. It's the most faithful reproduction of that era I've ever seen, to be honest. For pixel horror, I'm going to go back to Faith because I'm obsessed with that game. I think it's peak pixel horror, SNES era kind of graphics, or Famicom maybe. I'm sorry that I'm actually not sure which console it's replicating, but that era, whatever you want to call it. And oh god, now beyond that is when I'm starting to get a little lost.
You want us to come back to you?
Yeah, all right, let's go with that.
Sharky, have you got a Mount Rushmore?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's just constantly evolving and changing. It's sort of like saying, "Hey, what's your favorite movie?" It's I don't know, man. I guess if I had to pick 4 just off the top of my head, I'd probably say The Mortuary Assistant is definitely up there. What's the other one? Oh, I had them all. You know what? I'm going to say Mortuary Assistant. I'm going to put in At Dead of Night because that's just really great. I'm going to throw in Metal Gear Solid just because it's pretty solid. That's probably one of my fave games of all time. And then Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna say Faith because that was a good time.
Yeah. Matt,
But I mean, I had so many. They're all interchangeable. Can I have like a lot of No, go on.
that's a mortuary system for me. It's up there for me. I absolutely love that. But I'll try and say mine a bit. But Sue, do you want to add to your?
Yeah,
what
I've
yours
just
be?
spent this whole time like trying to think, and I'm like, mortuary assistant definitely though for me also, because it has the random scares. You can't get used to it, and I like doing little tasks. They're not overly pleasant tasks, but I like doing tasks in games. And on your list, actually, which I'm not looking at it, but just for reference, Layers of Fear, I thought was fantastic. There's something about that game. There was something about it that was just, yeah, I loved it. And I can't think, there was an Emeka game as well
Oh,
that was on my list, and I can't think of
Summer
what it
58.
was. I don't think that was the first one I played, although that's an amazing game.
Would it
Maybe
be?
I think it's
It
fine.
might have been Find Yourself.
Find Yourself?
Yeah.
Just find yourself.
There's another one that sounds similar to Locked
Yes,
Up.
there is.
Locked Up, yeah,
There's
there we
Locked
go.
Up, Find Yourself, and there's another. There's loads.
Yeah,
But
Father's Day.
yes, Father's Day as well. We'll go with Find Yourself though, just because I liked the choppy changiness of being 1 minute in a room and then you're outside being chased by a clown or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna go with those. I'm probably gonna kick myself at the end of this because there's millions, but
so many.
yeah.
There's so many.
And of course, and Visage, we haven't really discussed, or Visage, however you say it, Visage.
Yeah.
It's French, so it should actually be Visage, but I always feel really pretentious saying it.
I say Visage, don't worry.
I know it's a PT-based game, but I adored it. I thought it was fantastic. I'm going to put it up there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. At least it came
Chucking it
out.
up there. Yeah.
It did. Exactly.
Yeah, PT.
Oh, but mortuary assistant like that. I'm noticing a pattern, and going back to one thing you brought up before, Sharky, about what is the next PT, and going about reasons why. Sue, you mentioned it is the random jump scares. Like for me, I feel like that is the future. Like I feel like mortuary assistant did something that no indie game had really done before, or any game really, in terms of just how quick and how readily loaded their jump scares were in a random order. I've never seen anything like it, and it scared the bejesus out of me.
You know, it's sort of like what Valve were doing with Left 4 Dead, having an AI director that sort of knew when to throw more zombies or to back off, or to sort of, if you're going through it too quickly, it would do something to sort of try and slow you down. I mean, it's all just coming down to AI taking over, really.
Yeah. Which is nicely brings us to the future of indie horror. So, are we excited for the future of indie horror? And so, let's talk about the future of indie horror and summarize why we love indie horror so much. Let's put those two questions together into one. And yeah, so Tango, do you want to? How excited are you, and why do you love indie horror so much?
Well, I love it so much because I feel like it's where people are allowed to be experimental. Like the limitations of like AAA games go out the window with indie, and that's exactly what I want. Because I want people, to push boundaries with games. I don't want just the same schlock over and over again. So like indies, you can get that, like at the cost of, they probably won't get as big as Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but you'll play a game that might be like nothing else. And that's what I want out of a game, really. So that's definitely why I love indie horror, because there have been some games that I've played, indies, in the last year or two, that have been better than AAA, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that's really a testament to how quality they are. But as for the future of indie horror, if we could stop getting PT likes, I'd be very happy. Because I'm sick of that trend. I was sick of it the moment it started. I don't think any of them have come close to being as good as PT. So personally, so I just feel if we could stop that trend and go back to trying other things, and so I'm very cynical about certain aspects of indies, but definitely PT likes, if they could chill out with those, I'd be happy.
For sure. And Sue, what about yourself?
I'm very excited about this new trend of the body cam footage style games that are coming out. I think that's super exciting. But indie in general, for me, I like the fact that as was said, they can be better than AAA. They normally are. And if they're not, I'm still going to love them. If they're trashy, if the voice acting is really dodgy or the game is kind of silly, I still get enjoyment out of it. I kind of like it when they're a bit janky sometimes. But yeah, I think as far as future goes, I think sort of the found footage and body cam style thing is going to be a new thing, and hopefully that will give a boot to all of the PT style rip-offs, because there's so many now.
Yeah,
like
too
it's
many.
been done to death, and I think some of the games that have kind of replicated it, that's it. They've done it. It's peaked, in my opinion, at least. So yeah, but body cam footage is kind of my new thing to be excited about, at least.
Yeah, for sure. Good show, for sure. And Shaggy?
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'm kind of excited for the body cam stuff just because it does have this more sort of hyper realistic feel to it, which kind of breaks away that barrier. Because I like, again, that dev N4BA did a body cam horror that's on itch.io called Depart, and like it was really, really well made. It just felt different, had that atmosphere. So I'm kind of looking forward to it, but also kind of not so, just in the way you look at things that end up trending. And I feel like by the time more body cam horror starts coming out, there's going to be like so much body cam horror, to the point where it was sort of like when Phasmo got big, and then all of a sudden, a year later, there was so many Phasmo clones just trying to do the same thing, but they all did one thing really well, but the rest was just average. And it was like, you couldn't just get one game that did everything well. And it was kind of this thing where, everyone wanted to play different games like Phasmo, but by the time they were all in development and came out, everyone was over it. So they were just dying on release. And, I can kind of see that just happens with all the trends, obviously. But I guess I am looking forward to what the new Unreal Engine can sort of bring to indie devs, because it's definitely going to start making a lot of indie horror feel a lot more AAA, even though it's not going to be. And it'll give, that's the other good thing about it, because, AAA studios need to play it safe to make, to sell things. But indie games, whenever you play them, they're always like, you never know what you're going to get. It could be messed up, it could be disturbing, and they can just get away with it because they don't have a publisher that's trying to sell as many copies as possible. So I think once we are able to sort of bridge that gap of at least the way that games look, and they can start doing really interesting things with an art style using a new engine, it's going to be easier to make games. We're just going to have so many, which is good. Good and bad, but good mainly.
Yeah. Brilliant. Completely agree. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. That was so much fun. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, just other than thank you. And one more time, would you like to tell us where we can find you on your socials and on the internets and streams and stuff? Tanga.
Yeah, I'm Tangomushi on YouTube and Twitch, and I'm at I Love Klim on Twitter. Yeah.
Excellent. And Sharky?
Lonely Shark on YouTube, Sharky on Twitch, and It's Lonely Shark everywhere else, including TikTok.
Excellent. And Brutal Sue?
And just brutal_Sue everywhere. Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, all over the place.
Everywhere.
You will find me if you're looking.
Obviously, I put some stuff in the description as well. But thank you so much, guys. That was so much fun. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Everyone have a good time. Take care. Thank you so much for listening /
Thank you.
watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.